As you know, JFK is the last president to date to be assassinated while in office. He's not the last president to be shot. That's Ronald Wilson Reagan. But nevertheless, let's talk about what's he doing in Dallas in 1963. One of the things that you have to remember when he gets elected in 1960 is he puts Lyndon B. Johnson on the ticket as his vice presidential running mate. What is Johnson's importance for the campaign? He's a Texan. So he brings Texas into the fold. And in 1964, for example, it's 25 electoral votes. So that, that's a pretty good margin when you consider the fact that only, let's see here, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, and California. Only those states have more electoral votes. And Johnson can deliver Texas. He did it before. He'll do it after. He can do it again. So what do they need to do? Well, when you think about the Democratic Party at this time, don't think, they're not a monolithic party. They're not of one ideological persuasion, right? You have liberal and conservative Democrats. In Texas, they are conservative Democrats, right? If a Texas Democrat in the 1960s was basically taken out of the 1960s and put in today, he'd be, what would we call them? Republican, all right? Basically, the name just switched, but the conservatism still remains. So Kennedy basically needs these conservative Democrats to vote for him, because after all, he's this Massachusetts liberal Democrat, and that's why LBJ's on the ticket. So he's in Texas in November of 1963 in order to shore up support of the Texas Democratic Party, to make sure that Texas remains in the Kennedy column. So what's the trip like? Well, on the morning of November 21st, 1963, he flies out of Washington, D.C., and he flies to San Antonio. There he dedicates a laboratory and has a little parade, and then he flies on to Houston, where he has a dinner. He has a fundraising dinner along with his wife. He's not done, though. That night, they actually fly from Houston to Fort Worth that night. So the last night that Kennedy has, he's going to end in Fort Worth, along with his wife. The next morning, he gets up and he's going to deliver a small speech outside his hotel, and then he flies to Dallas Love Field. Very short flight. So that's the reason why whenever you watch anything that's remotely related to the assassination, you usually see him walking down the stairs of Air Force One at Dallas Love Field. But nevertheless, he's going to be in a motorcade. November 22nd, 1963 was a gorgeous day. So the Secret Service decided, obviously for the last time, to remove the convertible. They're going to take off the top so that the people of the United States, particularly in Dallas, could see their president. Well, they're driving through the streets, and he's in a car with Jackie, and the governor and Texas and his wife are with them as well. Well, suddenly, as they're driving through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, 3 shots ring out. The first shot, most likely, not most likely, it didn't hit him. It missed. We don't know where it went. There's a whole bunch of theories about that. But we do know where the second and third shots go. The second shot goes through his neck, and it goes from behind his neck out through the front. All right. There's a famous video, and if you're squeamish, I really wouldn't recommend that you watch it. But there's a famous video called the Zapruder film, and you can tell when Kennedy is shot the first time in the neck is because when they're coming through, as they're panning through the video, suddenly they hide behind the car is behind this road sign, so you can't see the car. But once the car emerges from beyond the road sign, you see Kennedy, and he has his arms like this, as if there's something wrong, as if he's choking on something. He's been shot in the throat. And by the way, that bullet goes into John Connally, the governor of Texas. The second shot that hits him, so this is the third total, hits him in the back of the head. And that's what really kills him. It's a headshot, and then of course we have that famous scene where Jackie tries, jumps out, goes onto basically the trunk of the car. There's a whole bunch of stories of why she does that. But nevertheless, JFK was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22nd, 1963. Now, Oswald will never be on trial, mainly because of the fact that a couple of days later, he's going to be killed himself by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. But nevertheless, the the assassination of JFK really kicks into overdrive much of what he wanted to do. It's up to his successor, using the legacy of his former chief executive, to push forward with the legislative plan of tax cuts, of the civil rights bill, and we'll even see another one with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But that is left to his successor, LBJ, and let's talk about him in our next video.